In the 48 hours since the Supreme Court gutted Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, I think this is probably the biggest news. 6 of the 9 states that have been subject to the law's pre-clearance formula have already taken steps to restrict voting. In Texas, just 2 hours after Tuesday's Supreme Court decision came down, Attorney General issued a statement saying that Texas voter ID laws and gerrymandering plans could go into effect immediately. And similar actions are being taken in Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, South Carolina, and Virginia to gerrymander and to suppress the vote. But this war against voters didn't begin on Tuesday, or last week, or last month, or even last year. The war against voters started in 1980 when Ronald Reagan, or 81, when Ronald Reagan took over the presidency. In fact, it started in 1980 before he even stepped foot inside the White House. Reagan's first speech during his campaign for the presidency took place in Neshoba County Fair in Neshoba County, Mississippi, Philadelphia, Mississippi, which at that time was a white supremacist stronghold. Reagan's campaign chose that event and that area for his first campaign speech to get racist votes. Well, why would you say they're racist votes? Well, Neshoba County was this was where 3 civil rights activists were murdered in 1964. They made a movie about it. They were shot to death by racists who were enraged by the idea of African Americans having not only equal rights, but the right to vote. To vote. During his presidency, Reagan opposed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 openly. In fact, he said that the Voting Rights Act was, quote, humiliating to the South, end quote. In the years since Reagan took office, and since the Reagan Revolution has spread across America, pretty much everybody in the United States has, not pretty much everybody, but a large chunk of this country, particularly the so-called Republicans and moderates or independents, have taken the position that, everybody shouldn't have a voice in our democracy. And, America ain't all that great. I mean, we hate our government, right? How can you have a great country if you got a lousy government? The fundamental assumption of Reaganomics is that America is bad. Government is not the solution to your problems. Government is the problem. Government is bad. America is bad. That's the founding core principle of Reaganomics and Tea Partynomics. And besides losing faith in the very foundations of our nation, consider some of the other things that America's lost since the not-so-good old days of Reagan. To start with, we've lost our ability to keep corporations in check, to prevent them from stealing millions from the working class. Thanks to Reagan, corporate theft and illegal behaviors have skyrocketed because he did away with government oversight and regulation of corporate America. As a result, since the Reagan Revolution, corporations have run roughshod over our economy and our democracy. Reagan's policies led to one of the greatest financial scandals in American history, the savings and loan debacle, which cost taxpayers billions of dollars and set the stage for weak banking regulations of today. And if people like Senator Phil Gramm, following Reagan's philosophies, hadn't done away with regulation and oversight of America's big banks, the financial scandals that have taken place over the last decade would never have happened. Meanwhile, as Reagan was helping out corporate America, he was waging an all-out war on labor in America. His attacks on organized labor in America and the NLRB drove down employee wages. His all-out assault on labor and his staunch opposition to the minimum wage led to 3 decades of flat wages while CEO and executive pay went through the roof. Between 1983 and 1988, Reagan's policies led to 10 million Americans losing their jobs through an epidemic of plant closings and layoffs. And of those 10 million who lost their jobs, many were forced to take lower-paying jobs. The middle class began to crumble during the Reagan presidency. Under Reagan, the number of families living below the poverty line exploded by 1/3. And these same families were then hit by Reagan's cuts to social welfare programs like Medicaid and food stamps. Oh, and let us not forget, ketchup is a vegetable for school lunches. Since Reagan took office, the share of total before-tax income flowing to the top 1% of Americans has doubled. The destruction of our economy since Reagan took office is largely thanks to his failed theory of trickle-down economics, which has over and over and over again been debunked. I just spent a half hour with Ralph Nader. You can see it on TV next Friday, a week from Friday. And he's just like, yeah, that's where it all began. Since Reagan was so obsessed with this notion, actually, he says, a lot of it also began in the 70s with the Powell memo. Since Reagan was so obsessed with this notion, he did nothing to reduce the levels of poverty and the growing income gap in America. But a strong economy and government oversight of corporate America are not the only things we've lost since Reagan stepped foot inside the White House. We've lost trust in our government. After all, the Reagan administration was one of the most corrupt in American history, including, by one estimate, 31 Reagan-era convictions, including 14 convictions in the Iran-Contra affair and 16 in the Department of Housing and Urban Development scandal. Over 183 appointees of the Reagan administration either resigned under an ethical cloud or were indicted criminally. Reaganomics continues to devastate this nation, and Reagan's philosophy that America is bad, that our government has no value, that our government is the problem, not the solution, continues to damage our body politic.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's time for us to say, Reaganomics, stupid mistake. Reagan worldview, stupid mistake.